everybody, and welcome to Kids Time. My name is Sonja, and I'm the Christian Education Director here at Emmanuel Lutheran Church in Missoula, Montana. I'm so glad that you joined me today. And today, our story that we are going to listen to is about another miracle. Remember, last week's story was also about a miracle, and this one takes place right after Jesus fed those 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Well, before we get to our story though, I want you to try something. I want you to try it. Press all your fingers together and then put your middle finger down so that it's bent and your knuckles are touching, and I want you to push real hard on your knuckles. Now, I want you to try something. See if you can move your pinkies apart from each other. Like that, yeah. Now how about your thumb? Yeah. And how about your pointer finger? Yeah, pretty easy to do, right? Well, now, remember, keep those knuckles and those fingers together. Try taking that ring finger and moving those apart. See if you can do it. Oh, it's so hard. I got mine just a little bit apart, but it's so hard. Pretty amazing if you can do it. So our story that we're going to listen to today is also about another amazing story. Today, our story is from the Spark Bible. So if you have a Spark Bible and would like to follow along, you can turn to page 294. And this story is taken from Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through 33. And it's called Walking on Water. The disciples were just waking up on their boat. They had been out on the water all night. Yawn, stretch. It was so early, the sun wasn't even up yet. Andrew rubbed his eyes and looked into the fog. "Hey," he whispered, "do you see what I see?" "Ooh, it's a ghost," James cried out in fear. The disciples were shaking in their sandals. They were terrified. Through the fog, they could see the outline of a person walking on the water. It was Jesus. "Don't be afraid, it's just me," Jesus said. He waved a friendly hello. "If it's really you, Jesus, tell me to walk on the water," Peter said bravely. "Okay," Jesus shrugged. "Come on out, Peter. The water is fine." Gulp. Peter swallowed hard. He placed one foot onto the water. Plop! It didn't go under. He tried the other foot. Plop! He was standing. He kept his eyes glued on Jesus as he took a few careful steps. He walked faster and faster, splish, splash. Only his feet were getting wet. Jesus smiled at him. Peter felt the wind blowing on his face. He took his eyes off of Jesus and looked up at the dark clouds. He felt afraid. Uh-oh, his ankles were wet. Uh-oh, his knees were wet. Uh-oh, Peter was sinking. "Help me, Jesus, save me," he yelled. Jesus reached out his hand and pulled Peter out of the sea. "Why did you stop looking at me?" Jesus asked, holding tightly to his friend. "Don't you trust me?" The wind stopped. They climbed into the boat full of cheering disciples. "Hooray, this proves it," they said. "You really are the Son of God." From that day on, the disciples were excited to tell everyone they met about the power of Jesus. Hi, I'm just headed down to the water here in a little bit, and thought I'd get ready. I've got my sunscreen and my sunglasses, my beach towel, and I have something else to help me in the water too, because I'm not always the greatest swimmer. And so I have my life jacket in the car, and then I also have this pool noodle that helps me float. I can tie it around my waist or just kind of rest on it and just float in the water. So it's there to help me. And just like my life jacket keeps me secure and safe, right? And in our story today, Jesus was on the shore and the disciples were out in a boat. And it was kind of dark and stormy outside. The water had large waves and it was foggy out, so the disciples couldn't see real well. And Jesus saw the disciples that they were having a hard time on the boat. And so he decided he would go to them. So he started walking out to them. And he was walking on top of the water. And normally people can't do that, right? But remember, this was Jesus, and Jesus can do anything. So Jesus was walking on top of the water. And the disciples saw this figure and weren't sure who it was, and they thought maybe it was a ghost that was walking toward them. And so they were scared and very afraid. And Jesus saw them and said, "It's me, it's Jesus." And the disciples were very doubtful of that. They didn't believe it. And so they said, "Well, if you're really Jesus, then you should step out onto the water and help me step out on the water and walk to you." And so Jesus said, "Sure." So Peter hopped out of the boat and he started walking on the water as his eyes were on Jesus. And he couldn't believe it, that he was walking on the water too. And then he started to look around him and he got really scared and afraid. And then he started to sink. And he cried out to Jesus. He said, "Jesus, save me, help me." And Jesus did. He pulled him out of the water and they got back on the boat together. And the disciples were so thrilled that this really was Jesus and that he lived up to his promise. He promised that Peter could walk out to him, and he started to. But Jesus asked Peter, "Why did you take your eyes off me?" And it was because Peter was afraid. And we all are afraid at times and scared and maybe a little too confident that we don't need God in our lives. But this taught the disciples that, yes, we do need God in our lives. Jesus is there to help us. He's there to help us stay afloat in life. And even though sometimes we might get scared or have doubts or be a little nervous, that God is always there for us and that we just need to trust in him and pray to him to help us. And he will always help us. And so God is just like our own flotation device. He will keep us afloat in that water and in life. We just have to trust in him and ask for help. I'm so glad that you were here to join me today, especially when we could learn about Jesus' miracle of when he walked on water and helped Peter to walk on water as well. Before we go, let's say a prayer together. So let's fold our hands, bow our heads, and close our eyes, and then you can repeat after me. Dear God, we know you are with us, but sometimes we will still doubt. Help us keep our eyes focused on you all the time, even when we're afraid or nervous. Amen. Well, have a good day, everybody. Goodbye. We'll see you next week.